education of women. And I think in her words, she said she believes that women are even more powerful than men. And tonight we have a very special panel in keeping with the theme of educating women and children and the empowerment and upliftment of women and children. We have John Homewood from the Henry Crown Fellowship, Mukti Datta from the India Leadership Initiative, and Maria Pacheco of the Central Africa Leadership Initiative, all of them focusing either on the upliftment of women and, in John's case, the education of children. Can you kindly, just in opening, share with us the work that you are doing? Perhaps we'll just start with you, Maria, and then move over to John. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Well, before I start, I just want to say two things. I really believe in the power of business, and I believe in the power of women. Business, because I think through a sustainable way, you can now change social problems and environmental problems. And women, because I think women have strong dreams and great potential, but that are not given the opportunities. And when you mix business and women together, you create a powerful force of change. So what we do really is we work with, especially with rural women in Guatemala. I'm not Africa, Central America. We work with rural women in Guatemala, and we give them the opportunity to become formal businesses that can become part of global value chains to generate income. And what we love is once women have income, they will send their kids to school, they will educate their children, they will change the next generation. So that's what we do, bringing women economic opportunities for social transformation.
Thank you. Mukti?
Yeah, I'd like to say that the area where I work in, women are quite oppressed and they don't have the opportunities. They come from a society which is very male-dominated. And I completely agree with Maria when she says that giving women the opportunity to start a business and to skill them in such a way that they can have sustainable livelihoods, one can see immediately the change that comes about in not only the woman herself, giving her confidence, giving her courage, giving her huge satisfaction, but also in the way that the families change. The children get educated better. The men also respect the women much more. And the whole society changes because of the fact that the woman is now earning a livelihood and because she's skilled and she's empowered. So we started this project in one area, and it's spread to many different areas in the high Himalayan areas of India.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, so I'm a guy who's a huge believer in the power of women, especially women's education. How many of you here have a mother who's educated? Right, like 98% of the hands in the audience go up. Remember the moment when Malala was asking the girls in Kenya, how many of you have an educated mother? And not a single hand went in the air. Well, this is basically what I think of as the lottery of life. If you're born in the right place at the right time, to the right parents, you're guaranteed education. If you're born in the wrong place at the wrong time, you are not guaranteed an education, and you have one more generation who lives in poverty or who are not empowered by education. So you asked just to do a brief introduction. So I founded an organization called Room to Read. I quit Microsoft in 1999 because I just thought, as I traveled the world as an executive, I saw all these kids who had lost the lottery of life, and I thought, there but for the grace of God go I. I was born in the right place at the right time in a small town in America, and I had a library and great teachers and a great education, so I thought, why not try to bring that gift to millions of kids all around the world? Since this is the Action Forum, I will just give you very quickly what our actions have been. We've opened 2,500 schools. We've opened 18,700 libraries. We put 17 million books in the hands of kids. And because we often found that when we opened schools or libraries, that more boys showed up than girls, because 2/3 of those who are out of school in the developing world are girls and women, we started a long-term scholarship program for young women, like the Malalas of the world, to surround them with social workers and mentors and give them everything they need to succeed in school, from school fees to uniforms to book bags to mentors and life skills classes and after-school tutoring. It started small. We started with 4 girls in a nation of Nepal in 2001. By 2010, we had 10,000 girls in the program. By 2013, we crossed the 20,000 girl threshold. I'm proud to say today, and a number of you here in the room today are supporters of ours, so thank you for that. We have 37,000 young women in the program with the goal of getting to the milestone of 50,000 young women by the end of next year.
Thank you. So the core challenge, as you approached this work, what was the core challenge that you were looking to solve? And how did it link? Did you approach it with a sense of a theory of change? Or did that just evolve over time, where you realized over time by focusing on this group, it does eventually lead to quite significant social change? So what was the core challenge? And did you have a theory of change as you approached this work?
For me, I ran into women's empowerment by accident. I'm a biologist, I was an organic farmer, and I was really interested in recovering ecosystems in Guatemala. But I realized soon in a country where war had been there for 30 years and then 60% of population in poverty, you can't take care of the earth if people are not taken care of before. And the community, especially the women, would say, you know, Maria, what we need are really sources of income. If we have that, the rest we can do. So it became, okay, you know, what can we sell from the villages to the markets? And once we started seeing the money coming in and seeing what women did with the money, we became really fascinated about the power of women. And I think men are very important, but men have more opportunities in this country. So when we saw women, like I was saying, sending their kids and changing their society through a small income, doing things by hand because they didn't go to school, they didn't have that. They didn't even speak Spanish. They spoke a Mayan language, which disconnected them from the rest of the world. So we had no theory. We just really seen what women and what girls with an education and women with an opportunity to become their dreams do for society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mukti?
Yeah, I think for us the biggest challenge really was to enable the women, to convince the women, I would say, to come out of their homes and to try at least to get out of a very oppressed and male-dominated kind of a situation where they were leading lives of drudgery from morning to evening, looking after the children, looking after the cattle, going to the farms, and the men mostly were not really doing anything in our part of the world. Either they sit around tea shops and drink, or they go out and work in the plains and in the cities and are absent from the lives of the women. So there was a great lack of confidence that we can't really do this. And then the second challenge was to set up a system in which these women could actually learn weaving and spinning and do it in such a fine way that it would not be a sort of an NGO product that people would buy out of compassion or out of charity, but it would be a product that would be taken to the level of, you know, really gorgeous designer products. And that took a long time. It took about 2 or 3 years for the women to actually, you know, get the hang of it. And I found that the most important thing was the solidarity among the women, because this is talking about 700 or 800 women that we started training. And that solidarity, that sense of solidarity among the women is what really got them very motivated. And that is also what got the men folk to start respecting the work, as because in the beginning they said, oh, this is just going to be like a sort of a little project for the women, and they were just going to sit and chat. And then when they actually saw that the money was coming home and that the women were bringing in a steady income and also changing the way that the households were run, for example, a very small thing, but instead of using firewood for cooking, the first thing the women did was to get a gas connection. The second thing they did was to get rid of all their unproductive cattle. So those challenges, actually, the women themselves, and we were amazed and surprised to see it, you know, with what confidence and how fast the women actually started, you know, going from a level of just basic training to a level of excellence. And and the second challenge, of course, was working with our government, which is, of course, not easy at all, but that was something which had to be done, because if I had to scale up a project like that, working with government was something which was necessary.
So Mukti, just a follow-up question on that. The success of your project and the work that you do speaks for itself. How many years have you been doing this now, sustainably?
Well,
With the women weavers, as an example?
the Panchachuli Women Weavers was started about 15 years ago.
Right.
And it's been sustainable for over a decade now, about 12 years. And the second project, which was actually my action pledge in 2013, was taking up a huge challenge after terrible floods in an area called Kedarnath, where the women were completely devastated after losing all their menfolk in the deluge. And so that is something that we took up in 2013, and I'm happy to say that after 2 years of training, these women have now formed their own not-for-profit company and are just on the brink of self-sufficiency and self-reliance.
Yeah, thanks. So the follow-up question was, thank you, but the follow-up question was, there must have been something that you did in the process of engaging with women where they took ownership and had buy-in of the project. You often hear that projects fail because women or the groups that you're looking to work with get spoken to or get prescribed solutions. What was your process was there a process that you underwent to get that initial buy-in so that the ownership resided with the women and not with those who will instruct?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought of myself as a catalyst more than as somebody who was directing the operations. And the key to the success of the women, I think, was the fact that they themselves became their own leaders. Leaders emerged from those groups of women. And because of education of some of these women, they were able to take on roles like marketing, like production, like human resource management, and so on and so forth. So all the people who are in responsible leadership roles in the organization are local rural women. And I think that was really the key to success.
Great. It reminds me very much of that imagery that we saw in the film when she describes her father, and it was that he was there, but he allowed her unfolding as opposed to pushing her or saying this way. So I think the support structure has to be there, but you have to allow the leadership to emerge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for that. And John, maybe just from you, what challenge were you looking to solve? And did you come to the project or the work that you decided to do with some theory of change? And if not, did a theory of change emerge during the course of doing your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the biggest challenge we were facing is if you look at the numbers, it's fairly daunting. There's 780 million people in the world who can't read or write, 2/3 of whom are girls and women. There are over 100 million children in the developing world who woke up this morning and did not go to school. Over 100 million. Think about that. That's an insanely large number. So the first challenge for us was to come up with a program that worked, that had impact, but then we had to scale the heck out of it, because there's so much philanthropy in the world that doesn't scale. And it's okay, like it can make a small difference at the margin, but I think that as social sector and business leaders, all of us have to challenge ourselves to say, if we find something that works, then let's scale it so that we can reach more people in more places. If you look at, for example, the elimination of the guinea worm, how did that happen? Well, you had a lot of leaders in the world who said, let's work together and try to scale, rather than trying to all be in our own little silos, doing a little bit here and a little bit there. Our theory of change for girls' education, women's education, I think is fairly simple. I would say that I think investing in girls' education is the biggest no-brainer in the history of philanthropy. That's my theory of change. Why do I say that? And I got one round of applause from the fifth row. Thank you very much. But the rest of you are waiting to hear me defend that. Why is that? Well, if you look at the ripple effect of a young woman like Malala getting educated, it affects everything. Educated women, if for every year of education, and you know this in your work in Central America, you know this in India, for every year of education a young woman receives beyond the norm, her average wages eventually go up by 15 to 20%. So give her 5 additional years of schooling, her wages double. What do women in the developing world do when they get extra money? They invest it in their family. They invest in food, clothing, shelter, education. No offense to the men of my gender, but when we make an extra dollar, we tend to spend it on ourselves, not so much on our family. Women are much more likely to do that. Educated women get married later, they have fewer children, and we have a choice. Every time a girl like Malala goes to school or does not go to school, if you look 3 generations out, you could have 9 grandkids who have an uneducated grandmother, or you might have 4 or 5 grandkids who have an educated mother, an educated father, an educated grandmother. Now, this must cost a lot of money, right? You have to have social workers on staff and homework helpers, and you're buying book bags, and bicycles. No, it's not the least bit expensive. The average cost, at least for our program, is $300 US per girl per year to give her everything she needs to take control of her life and to be another version of Malala and to then be tomorrow's educated mother. So our theory of change is simple. We got to do this. We got to do more of it. We got to do it more quickly. We got to do it at scale. And we have to say to the forces of darkness that are trying to determine the future for these young women, we have to say to the forces of darkness, excuse my French, screw you. You will lose and we will win because we'll out-organize you. And whatever the issue is, we have to not leave a single girl or a single boy behind. Every day we lose is a day we do not get back.
Thanks, John. We spoke a little bit earlier today. We did a deep dive on race in America, and the issue of youth came in. And one of the topics that we raised was where is the youth in all our discourse? And the counter to that is what responsibility are the adults taking? So there are things that we know that can be done and that are in our hands to change. And I think you've just demonstrated that very nicely in your comment, taking responsibility for the things we can change and putting real effort behind that. Malala, and it's implied, but perhaps just to make it explicit, the idea of men in the idea of the importance of men in the empowerment of women. And her father played a central role. We also read, one of our Aspen readings is by Simone de Beauvoir, who at the end of that specific reading talks about women being authorized by men as an important drive for their empowerment. In your experiences, how important have you seen the role of men in the empowerment of women? And perhaps, John, you can reflect as a man yourself on your own self-awareness. I'd like us to go through the panel again, but on your own awareness as a male in the work that you do. And I think as a white male, I think that's also important. There's a very particular agency that carries in society. So perhaps some reflection on that would be useful.
Can I just say something just really quick on that? I know we're low on time, so I could just give you a quick answer to that. Is sometimes people will act shocked that I spend as much of my life as I do and care as much as I do about women's education and girls' education, which always kind of strikes me as being really strange, because if a woman cares about education for boys, that's not considered the least bit abnormal. Right? And so I guess my challenge to all the men in the audience is to say, let's not let this get pigeonholed as a girl's issue or a women's issue. To paraphrase Hillary Clinton, it's a human rights issue. Malala is not a girl's issue. Malala is not a women's issue. Malala is a human rights issue. Malala and her sisters are the issue of whether those of us who have resources are going to care enough to go fight the forces of darkness and tyranny that want to dictate what that young woman's future should be. So I always go back to the fact that I just think, to me, this is just such a human rights issue, and it's all about those of us who have power. What world are we going to let be created?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Maria.
Yeah, for me, well, I'm part in Guatemala of Vital Voices in Central America. We have that, and it's women supporting women, and I think we're able to understand the problems behind women and girls not being empowered. But for me, I think an important moment came when we started seeing men supporting us. And I'm not talking about rural women there, I'm talking also about us. And it was Cali Fellows, Central American fellows, that started giving women spaces in private sector places where it was just men. And one thing happens, and it's kind of healing, a kind of wholeness happens. When you, as a woman, you don't have to fight anymore, but you're recognized and you're seen. And the peace and the transformation that comes from that and the thankfulness is great. So for me, that's new. It's happening in Guatemala. For us, we've been fighting, and now we don't have to fight anymore. And it's just a big transformation, not to have to fight, but just to be able to be.
Thank you. Mukti, your experience?
Well, I would say also that it is a question of social justice and equality, equal opportunities for everybody. And initially, men resist that. They resist the change. They resist the fact that women are getting more empowered. They're getting more confident. They're coming out of their homes. They're challenging the social structure and the conventional structures of the areas that they live in. But as you said, that slowly, you see the change actually happening and men supporting them. Not all the men, but most of them are very supportive eventually. And then there's a coming together and a kind of a synergy happens in which the whole thing becomes something quite wonderful, actually. And then other women who have not had these opportunities, they also stand up and they say, hey, we also want to be part of this. And then the question of scaling up happens, which is again a real challenge, is how to scale up. How many weavers do we want? How many spinners do we want? What other opportunities can there be? Is there opportunity in the agriculture sector? Is there an opportunity in the animal husbandry sector? What other opportunities are there? Is the questions that then the women themselves answer those questions, and then they say, what really they want. And so it's quite amazing to see how ordinary, rural, not very well-educated women take up this enormous challenge, and the moment that they get empowered, the first thing that they do is to hope for a better education for their children, and the aspirations of the younger generation go sky high because of that.
It surprises me. We come from totally two different regions of the world, yet we're seeing the exact same things.
So we always talk, at the Action Forum, that this is about being in action. And one of the things I have learned about being in action is that's really where you learn about yourself. And that's where the magic starts to happen, because as much as you give to your work, you get something out, and there's a multiplier effect, and you learning and feeding off the people that you are working with. What insight can you share with us in terms of what you've learned about yourself in the course of your work? Anyone who's ready? John, you were very quick on the draw earlier.
I don't like to talk about myself.
Okay, well, we're going to stick with it for
no,
a while.
I don't. I mean, insights in myself. I think I'm passionate about an issue. I believe bold goals attract bold people. So when we started, we were little known. I didn't leave Microsoft with $1 gazillion. I had to be reliant on public support from the very beginning. I learned to never be afraid to ask for the order, because people are busy. They can't read your minds. Money doesn't fall out of the sky. You got. What did I learn? I learned you got to get on an airplane and circle the globe as much as you can. At least in my case, we're trying to raise money globally. But I think what I've mostly learned is that, and it was just an optimistic thing, not so much about myself, but about the rest of the world, is I feel optimistic, because I feel like those of us who have been given or who have been able to achieve a world-class education and change our own lives through education, we all know that without education, you're not you. Without education, Peter Reiling's not Peter Reiling. Without education, I'm not me. And what makes me optimistic is I think that people who have education are willing to bend over backwards to try to help the NGOs and the social sector leaders out there who want to give that same opportunity to kids who would not otherwise have it. We didn't reach 10.7 million students to date is what we've reached at Room to Read. We haven't reached that because of anything about me. We've reached that because we said, let's not be an organization. Let's be a global movement. I said, I don't want to be the leader of Room to Read. I want to be one of many, 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 many leaders of a global movement. So what I've tried to do for the most part is talk not about I, but about we. And then just challenge more and more and invite more and more people to get involved, to say together, I mean, world change is a team sport. And we tend to quite often talk about the individual or the I, and we think we need to move from first person singular to first person plural. And I learned that about myself because every time I heard myself, if I watched a speech or watched a tape, if I said, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I've opened X number of libraries, I didn't like how I sounded. I sounded so egotistical. So I had to switch to first person plural, mandatory. And I told my team, just put one of those electronic shock collars on me, like you put on your dog. And if you hear me say I, just zap me so I can talk about we and try to build it as a movement.
And I understand why you were resistant when I asked you to use the word I. You're still conditioned by the shock treatment. Yeah. Mukti?
Well, what I learned personally, since it is a personal question, is that I'm basically a very reserved and a shy person, and I hate being, in the limelight. I hate having to take things on. But as the work grew, I found that being confronted by social injustice and by all kinds of, miseries, and also being faced by the resilience of the human spirit, particularly in the case of the Kedarnath tragedy, I found that there's something in me that has awoken, which has a lot of courage now and a lot of determination to actually make a much, much bigger change than I have made so far, and also to stand up against whatever is wrong and to speak out, which was not there earlier. So I think that change is positive, and that is because of the enormous support that I have always received from the women, from the society, from people around me.
Thank you. Maria?
And for me, I think I've learned that no matter how tough something is, if you can dream it, you can change it. And following what you said, I think that individual dreams are strong, collective dreams are unstoppable. Nobody stops them. So for us, to start with very small group of people, and they grow and see how change happens, and how the more people involved, the faster change happens, that's fascinating and gives us hope. There's many challenges in the world, but if we work together, there's nothing we can't do. That's what I've learned.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your attention. I'm sure you will agree with me. It's a fascinating panel.